Dis mense gaan aanspreek sien iets met die chairperson.
Chair. Chair.
Chair.
Members of the panel.
Members of
Che gente?
Yes,
Sai che di?
it's a little thing where they say what they wanted and I think you should just go through. Did you see the email from Bongai?
Where?
When? On Friday, ne? I sent it on Friday, ne? Yeah, Friday evening.
Sien nie aan hier so net.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Grocery Retail Market Inquiry public hearings that are being held in Gauteng, in Pretoria. My name is Lola Mamtanga. I'll be chairing these public hearings, specifically just these ones. I did explain yesterday and the day before that the chairperson of this inquiry is Professor Helton Chiddle, as you may know. However, he has not been able to join us this week due to circumstances beyond his control and our control, or the Commission's control. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to you. Sorry, so before I do so, I'll ask my colleagues to introduce themselves. Thereafter, I'll ask the delegation from ShopRite to introduce itself, and then you may proceed with your, and then just indicate to us how you intend to proceed, because different stakeholders have come before us and have had a different plan, so we never know how it's which way to go, whether it's us asking questions or you actually have a presentation to make, and then we take it from there. However, I do understand that you would like us to first start with the trade terms questions, possibly market definition, but we think we will leave that for last. So the order of our questions from our side, we've decided, is that we will start with the supply-related questions. Those are your trading terms, as per your request, and then go into exclusive leases, and then if you've got any time left, we'll then deal with market definition questions. Over to you.
Good morning. My name is Sunal Grimbeek. I'm a principal economist at the Commission, and I'm leading the technical team that's working on the grocery retail inquiry.
Good morning. My name is Thabo Khumalo. I'm the senior legal counsel working on the retail inquiry.
Morning, Chair. Shall I go on the record first? My name is Leon Kushka. I'm counsel practicing at the Cape Town Bar. Just to explain briefly what my role is today and the reason for my presence, the panel may be aware that there are pending proceedings before the competition tribunal between Massmart and ShopRite, together with two other retailers, Pick n Pay and Spar. So there is a level of sensitivity, if I can put it that way, about questioning around exclusive leases. And I'm just here to watch, as it were, in regard to possibly compromising those proceedings. But I don't intend to sit and object. I might just whisper to my colleagues if I feel that it may be a territory where we would defer discussion if that is in order. So I'm instructed by worksmen from Cape Town. Ms. Krusher is also present at the hearing, and then we have further representatives from ShopRite's legal department, Mr. De Prier and Mr. Langenhoven, who are also present. The presentation will be undertaken by Mr. van der Merwe, who is from the head of the property division of ShopRite, Mr. van der Spey, who is in the position of a, what is he? Supplier relationship executive. And the intention is to do a very short introductory presentation from both of these gentlemen, to be followed by questions as the panel pleases, moving from there. And perhaps it fits well with respect, if I may put it that way, to leave the market definition for the end, because that may well be a bone of contention in relation to the pending proceedings. So thank you. That is my presence for today. So perhaps if we can then hand over to Mr. van der Spey.
Before you proceed, I just want to note that on what you've said regarding what may be sensitive or concerning sub judice matters on the tribunal relating to the
support team is one team. And then we've got 5 decentralized buying teams, which more or less represent provinces across the country. So we have a buying team in Western Cape, Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, the Free State, and in Gauteng. So these divisional buying teams serve the main supermarket banners of the Shoprite Group, which most people are aware with. That's the Shoprite, Checkers, and Usave banners. And in some instances, a buyer could serve both the Shoprite and Checkers banners, and in other instances, a buyer could be only buying for the Checkers, a Shoprite, or a Usave banner exclusively. It depends on the situation. So the responsibility of these buying teams is primarily the day-to-day activities that include negotiating the cost prices with suppliers, the ranging of products to stores, and determining the sell prices and planning promotional activities for products within their portfolio. These buying teams are also responsible for managing the relationships with suppliers in matters pertaining to their divisions. The Home Office support team supplies system and master data support, for example, the listing of vendors or the adding of new items. It negotiates the national trade terms, which I will address later on, as a lot of your questions were referring to those trade terms. We also guide and support the divisional buying operations. We facilitate national negotiations and provide strategic direction, and on an ongoing basis, we performance manage the suppliers. So we look at specific key performance indicators such as the suppliers' service levels into Shoprite. We analyze their performance within specific categories. We try to identify opportunities for efficiencies, and then we align on overarching strategies for particular banners, brands, or seasons and categories. Our Home Office support team is also responsible for managing the relationship with suppliers and dealing with them in matters that affect the country as a whole. Agreement with the supplier, and agrees on the terms and rebates and allowances, as well as the method and frequency of payments. These are renegotiated with suppliers annually, and this approach gives certainties to suppliers and Shoprite as to the terms of trade over and above what will be negotiated on an ongoing basis in the divisions. Suppliers therefore have upfront visibility of rebates before they enter into cost and promotional negotiations with the divisions. The terms are applied to all purchases from that supplier, irrespective of the actual cost price which is negotiated by each of these divisions, and all our suppliers are treated the same in this respect. I'll now deal with specific items on our trade term agreements for which you have received samples, and try to just explain the background around them. The first one being the basic rebate. This refers to a contribution by the suppliers to Shoprite's cost of doing business. For example, Shoprite has to incur the upfront costs of purchasing the stock before it's sold, maintaining inventory, financial and business-to-business IT systems, provide for receiving processes at all the sites to which stock will be delivered, with a safe storage of stock, and making these products available to be bought by customers in an inviting environment. With the limited space available in our stores, the inclusion of every product comes with the opportunity cost of another possible product, or having to remove a similar product from our offering. This facilitates Shoprite being able to offer the lowest prices to customers while still maintaining an accurate record, safe custody, due care and considered value of products in a world-class shopping environment. I'll move on now to what our settlement terms discount, to which there was a specific question as well. This relates to the payment terms negotiated in respect of how quickly and frequently a supplier requires payment. The various suppliers have different cash flow requirements, and Shoprite accommodates them in this regard at a fee. The growth incentives, which the Commission also highlighted, I'd like to explain. This is not necessarily with every supplier, but only where it's suitable for both parties through negotiation. This contribution incentivizes both the supplier and ShopRite to drive sales volumes together, and both parties share in the increased volume throughput. So by way of an example, the supplier knows that an increased production improves efficiencies and lowers costs, and larger volumes purchased by the retailers will improve the supplier's efficiencies. The agreed targets must be reached in order for ShopRite to earn the incentive, so it's conditional upon those. Only the supplier knows the benefit of producing the additional volumes, and the supplier then chooses to distribute this benefit to all its customers being all retailers and buying groups, and it distributes this to those customers at its own discretion. The supplier will then, through negotiation, share this efficiency with ShopRite, and in turn ShopRite passes the saving on to the customer. I'll now speak about the warehouse allowances. This is a cost that is charged to the supplier for the warehousing and distribution of product via ShopRite's distribution centres. ShopRite's centralised warehousing and distribution function removes many of the risks and logistical costs that suppliers would otherwise incur in order to stock our supermarkets. Furthermore, it drives efficiencies across the supply chain. It drives efficiencies across the supply chain doing it this way. Just by way of example, one full load truck going to a ShopRite store is much more efficient than 7 half trucks going from 7 different suppliers to that same store. There's a time saving at the receiving process, and then there's also the efficiency of delivering full truckloads. The supplier will then, through negotiation, share the efficiency with ShopRite, and ShopRite will in turn pass this saving on to the customer. If a supplier, it's not a required contribution, if suppliers choose to deliver directly to the stores, then that is their own prerogative, and they can do so, and this charge will not be applicable to them. I now deal with the question of stock responsibility, and I think I assume through the questions there was a damage allowance. I think this is covered within ShopRite under what we could call stock responsibility. This is where ShopRite accepts responsibility for more than just the damages. It's for the returns, the wastage, damages, and the safe disposal of the supplier's products, and this is a fee charged to them. The benefit here is to the supplier not carrying those risks, and then through a process of negotiation we would determine the fee, and then the saving on our side ShopRite would carry over to the customer. I address now the advertising fees on our rebates. This is the supplier's contribution to ShopRite's cost of promoting products and is based on an agreed percentage of the goods. This fee enables ShopRite to plan its advertising and marketing campaigns months in advance. ShopRite is one of the biggest investors in advertising in the country, and its suppliers benefit from this level of exposure through knock and drops, leaflets, national TV adverts, taxi TV and rank TV, local and in-store radio, digital forms of marketing, it's Facebook, mailers, websites, Twitters, as well as many in-store types of media, for example, till points, gondola ends, power wings, and in-store point of sale. ShopRite's also the only retailer to advertise suppliers' products in all South Africa's official 11 languages. There is a line on our rebates which is total off statement. That's not an additional rebate, just for the panel's clarification. That's just a sum of the total of the rebates on the different types of rebates on the agreement. It's not something extra. I did notice that there are some other types of allowances that were in the questions, some of which don't pertain to ShopRite. For example, a central office allowance. It's not something that we charge suppliers for, or term that we use. We also don't have something similar. I can't think of anything similar that we charge suppliers for. There were questions about redistribution allowances. It was a question of warehousing and redistribution. So I've addressed the warehousing. I think in terms of the redistribution, I'd like to take note of there are instances where suppliers have a return centre allowance. At this stage, it's only in Gauteng, and what this is it's to pick up that stock at every one of the ShopRite stores they deliver to. We would go and we would send our trucks to pick up that stock and deliver it to the return centre, and the supplier would then only have to go to the return centre to pick up all the return stock. So where this creates efficiency in the supply chain is that our trucks are going to the stores with full loads to deliver, and then coming back to the DC, which is their home, to pick up more stock. On their return leg, they are mostly empty. So there's an opportunity there for us to take stock that would otherwise have been picked up by the suppliers and bring it back to a centralized location. So this return center creates efficiency across the whole supply chain, and this efficiency we then share with the supplier through negotiation. It's for the supplier to agree to it or not, and ShopRite uses that money then to put into the price for the customer. The other type of efficiency allowance is a backhauling fee. This is not something that would be on the trade term, but it is, I think it was, to my mind, what was closely linked to what, when I read redistribution fees, so I thought for clarity's sake I would explain it. This is something that would be negotiated by a DC in a specific area, and by way of example, I'll explain how this works. If a truck was going to our ShopRite Ceres store to deliver goods, and we know that the Ceres fruit juice factory is there, on its return leg centre. So once again, this creates an efficiency across the whole supply chain. ShopRite and the supplier will, through way of negotiation, share in this efficiency, and ShopRite would look to put this back into the price for the customer. These agreements are done on an ad hoc basis because due to the nature of the agreement. There was also a reference made to category management contributions. So ShopRite is busy with the category management program, but this comes at no additional cost or fee or allowance in this initiative, or to the categories affected in this initiative. So,
just go back to the category management. I didn't quite get what you were saying there.
so we do. Okay, we have a
category management.
Yes, there was a question around category management contributions. So we have a category management program, but it's mostly internal of nature. Of course, suppliers do get involved as partners in our category, but it doesn't come at a fee. So our category management program is an initiative for us to be more strategic around specific categories, where we want to go into a greater level of detail and actually appoint specialists for key categories in our business. Because of the increased attention on these categories, it allows us to be more customer-centric, to analyze data more closely and monitor these categories more closely. But there's an incidental knock-on to the supply in that because we are focusing on the category more, we'll interact with them more, but there's no fee for the suppliers in this.
And the specialists, to your point, are paid for by ShopRite?
Yes, ma'am. They are paid for by ShopRite. They are our own employees.
Okay.
Relate back to efficiencies, which we then through negotiation share with the suppliers. There are other allowances that come at a service to ShopRite. I'll name two just for the completeness sake, or just to broaden the spectrum of what could be on a trade term. One, for example, is a data sharing agreement, whereby we would share that supplier's data, which we view as a commodity on our side, we would make available to them at a fee. It's not required that every supplier participate in this, and if they chose not to pay the fee, or they see no return on investment for it, it's their option not to sign up for that. Another type of allowance which could be present, and it's only applied in relevant cases, is a quality assurance allowance. And this is applied in cases where a supplier manufactures our private label house brand or right brand products, where we recover a fee from the supplier because we do our own independent lab testing on those products to ensure that they are of the quality standard we require. Okay. And then there was a question on store openings. So in respect of store openings or refurbishments, these are contributions in the form of promotional support, which is negotiated with suppliers. Suppliers get the opportunity here to market their products and leverage off the excitement of the store opening. Shoprite makes a big effort to advertise all new stores and refurbishments to the target market of that store. This is also one of the few opportunities that our individual stores get to lower their prices, lower than what that would be available to the divisions. So generally our prices are set across a division for the buying groups, and our buyers get really excited when there's a store opening and the opportunity to excite the customers in the local market, and our suppliers jump on board with that excitement. I'll deal now with listing of new suppliers. There was a question around this. So the requirements is that there must be a viable business case for a supplier of goods to be listed as a Shoprite supplier. This business case is driven by the natural market forces. Shoprite will determine what need state a certain product is serving and consider that product in light of the existing and competing products in that category. It will also, along with that, consider what Shoprite's strategy is in the category, the customer's demand, and market trends. New products don't require what was called in the questioning as a listing fee, but there would be support fee, which is charged to subsidize the promotional activities that go with new products, such as leaflet, preferential space in store, a fin or a shelf in store, and these are all to give the suppliers new products the best chance of success. Once Shoprite has established that a new product or supply listing is required, the supplier will have to pass due diligence and they will be able to provide the required volumes, the consistency of delivery, the quality, and adhere to the necessary food safety requirements. And then there will also be other administrative requirements, such as just proof of a bank account, or the company's documents with official company documents with which you are entering into, or in the case if it is an individual ID document will suffice. We then require that they sign our terms of supply and the trade term agreement, and that would complete the listing process. There was a question regarding the classification of suppliers. Shoprite does not have a policy on how to classify suppliers for purposes of differential treatment. Where we would rank suppliers is only regarding, we would rank them high to low in size, but this is only relevant for reporting purposes. And I'd just like to address, in closing, the question around buying power and the waterbed effect. Shoprite does not believe that it's in a position its position as a large buyer and its practices, as I've previously described, negate competitiveness in the retail market. This addressing the so-called waterbed effect. As I've previously stated, Shoprite offers much efficiency to suppliers, and it is the suppliers who ultimately decide how they distribute efficiencies or inefficiencies across their customers, which is all retail and buying groups. I don't believe it's financially feasible for large suppliers, who are mostly large listed companies or subsidiaries of listed companies, to recoup the margin that is lost on their main customer base, which is alleged to be the retail chains, from the marginal sales of the small players. To the contrary, it is likely that in certain instances, suppliers exercise more agility with smaller purchases, such as offering deeper discounts, which would not be affordable in respect of larger players, as margins would be more adversely affected. Small firms are also able to join buyer groups or franchises, for example that of Shoprite's own OK brand. These groups also benefit from prices and terms negotiated by the group. However, these small firms are not bound to purchase only through these opportunities, and they have the opportunity and the luxury of being able to shop around for prices. We also just like to highlight the agility of small and independent traders and spaza shops. and their competitiveness is not to be underestimated. We deem them highly respectable competitors, as they are very customer-centric. The fact that they are so conveniently located is a big plus point to the customer and adds value. They can be very nimble, they can pop up anywhere, and with little formal setup costs, infrastructure, little accountability towards their staff, and there's the kind of regulations and administrative that large corporates have to accept as reality are not always applicable to such smaller retailers, and that makes them formidable competitors to us. And we respect them just as much as we respect the other large retailers. Shoprite, when we started as a small group of 8 stores initially, which means we too were once classified as a small retailer, and the practices and the principles we employ both internally and towards the suppliers are the same today as they were back then when we had far less buying power. Since we have grown, we have been able to offer many efficiencies to suppliers, and we've passed these on to our customers, ensuring that they have lower prices they can trust always. That concludes my briefing, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Van der Speng. I'll just start off with just a general comment from us as this inquiry. Having sat and looked at all these rebates, allowances that are charged, the contributions that are made by suppliers, it left us with a feeling that if you're for a major retailer, this is how it comes across to us. It looks like there's you actually incur no costs whatsoever. That's the perception we have. And I would like you to use this opportunity to educate us and to change our view on this and make us understand at which point does Shoprite incur costs when you have all these allowances, when you have all these contributions coming from suppliers in respect of all the things, all the functions that you ought to be conducting as a retailer. So every question that we're asking, it's actually in that context, and as you answer, try and give us that a better picture so that we understand. We want to understand. We don't want to judge. We want to understand. And then as a first question, I just want to understand, obviously, a lot of the allowances that you've mentioned and the contributions that are made relate to costs of, to your operational costs. Am I correct?
No, they don't relate to operational costs.
What would you call them as a business? What do you call all these allowances?
We call them rebates.
No. I mean the actual functions that they pertain to, that they relate to, not the rebates, not the payment itself, not themselves, but the actual function that is being conducted. Wouldn't that be an operational function?
I suppose to an extent there would be operational functions, but it's over and above. For example, the warehouse allowance. It's not necessarily traditionally just retail. It's another type of operation altogether, and for that there's a separate allowance. For example, the data sharing, which is an allowance, that's not necessarily our core business, but we do view the data as a commodity to which there's a value attached, which we would then sell to suppliers. For example, the quality assurance allowance, that is directly related to us having to test the quality of a product, because in those cases we own the trademarks of those brands and we feel responsible to maintain those brands up to a specific standard. Where it pertains to advertising costs, one can say that we would always have to advertise as a retailer, but of course it is generally accepted in the market that when we advertise, it's not only that we advertise our brand, because we do not sell Shoprite, we sell Koo baked beans and we sell chicken. So it's a partnership that we enter into. So the cost, the admin, and the planning of those adverts are budgeted or are planned all by Shoprite. And there's terminology that the suppliers are aware of. They talk about above the line and below the line communication, marketing. So above the line would be their own. Let me use Koo as the example that popped my head, they would market the Coup brand, but they also have budget for actual spend on promotions, which would be in lower prices. That allows us to take that to the consumers, but also getting that product onto the leaflets and onto TV advertising. So in that sense, when we do advertise, it's necessary for us, but it's part of marketing a specific suppliers' brands as well.
Okay. Let me put my question differently then, based on the answer you've given. What would constitute operational costs in the manner in which you operate as Shoprite? Just give us those, if you could.
Right. So just regarding the warehousing, my colleague would like to answer just that it costs billions of rands to set up the warehouse and to procure the trucks, and the operations around that is the staff costs, the rental costs, the electricity costs, the capital expenditure necessary, the maintenance on these buildings, the petrol costs, and the like, the staff costs I've mentioned. Other operational costs would be our rent. If I just think of the simple income statement that we have, would be our employee costs, our rental and electricity, our IT costs, which in this day and age have become quite a big component of the business. I think those are probably our main four costs, unless my colleagues. Yeah, so for rental, electricity, and for staff costs, which are probably our biggest three, those are not recovered from suppliers.
Okay. Just then, for our understanding, you've given us what amounts to operational costs for Shoprite, and you also indicated, because there may be a fine line from where I'm sitting between what is your operational cost and the contributions that are made on some of these. That is our view that is my view for now. But that as it may, I just want to understand how on your financial statements, if you can answer this question, if any of you present today can answer this question for us so that we understand as well. If we were to look at Shoprite's annual financial statements, in your annual report, your income statement, and we look at operational costs, would these operational costs include any of the functions to which these contributions apply at all? Or are these completely separate? There's a clear line that is drawn that this has nothing to do with your operations.
I think the closest one probably is our marketing costs, which is excluded there, but I feel I've explained the reasons why there's a specific advertising allowance. For the rest, I just want to think how I'd like to answer this.
Yes.
While he's thinking, I just want to explain to you, Shoprite has went on the road of central distribution 20 years ago, which was different to our competitors in South Africa, which only recently started to go centralized distribution. Now, centralized distribution is a whole philosophy of how do you run your business. So for the people here in Gauteng, our DC there in Midrand Centurion on the hill there, that is the biggest warehouse in the southern hemisphere. It's 104,000 square meters. It's 25 meters high. It's filled with stock of billions of rand. But the whole philosophy is that the suppliers now delivers to that DC, and we distribute from there to our various stores. So obviously that's why the supplier pays us a warehouse allowance. He doesn't have to run, firstly, keep his DC, and also secondly run a truck to our store in Messina. We now put it in our truck with a full load and we send it to Messina. That is the philosophy of our business. Okay. If you come out, if you've been to Cape Town recently, we've just opened in September this year a new facility in Brackenfell also, which is 80,000 square meters, right on the R300 from the airport to the N1. You know, so that's a type of investment. Obviously, all that cost is in our income statement.
Yeah.
That is, the money that we've laid out, the staff that works at it. If the petrol goes up 1 cent, its effects is like 30 million rands a month, just petrol 1 cent, because that's the fleet that we have on the road to go to our various stores all over the country.
Okay. So, just to make an example, with your warehousing allowance, you're basically saying that you have saved your suppliers the cost and the effort of having to distribute to each and every store.
That's right.
Was this the case before you had a DC?
Before we had the DC, the whole supply chain was less efficient. So the products were more expensive from the supplier. So yes, we saved them costs. We don't know how much costs we saved them. We're not privy to that information, but the fact that they've entered this agreement with us, we can only assume it is worth it for them.
Okay.
And we don't know what additional savings they're still sitting with.
Okay.
Sorry, ma'am. I would like to try to address your question, because I do understand your point of view and how it would look like this is all over and above.
Yes.
I think the first important point to understand is that these allowances and agreements are agreed upfront with the supplier before any cost is negotiated. So the first instance, the supplier would already know the sum of these rebates before they present a costing to ShopRite. So in that, what the suppliers would call a cost of doing business with ShopRite, they are aware of that. So in essence, that is already built into their costing model, into our funding model. What it also affords us, it also allows us to know what kind of profitability we're sitting with the supplier before any costs are negotiated with. And in that respect, the profit that we make between the difference of our cost price and selling price, as well as the margin on these trade terms, those combined contribute to the targets of our net profit. So we have the ShopRite Group has many stakeholders, of which the customer is the most important one. So we put all our efforts into providing lower prices for that. Our other stakeholders are, for example, our shareholders, for which we are accountable for certain trading margin. So both the gross margin on difference between cost and sell prices, as well as these rebates, contribute to the lower prices and to the margins that we need to make. And those margins would essentially cover all operational costs. That's why we can highlight specific costs here where everything relates back to a service or a reason for the fees.
Yes.
Does that satisfy that?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. Let me maybe change the direction of this question a little bit and give it a bit of a context. We have been approached by smaller suppliers, some of whom are actually are still suppliers who are looking for retailers, to access retailers in order to get their goods on your shelves.
Yeah.
And I think it does become quite a surprise for a lot of them when they are faced with all these charges that are charged by the retailers, not only ShopRite for that matter. And so what I would like to understand is, you say these are agreed upfront. From a small supplier point of view, I don't think it's a matter of agreeing. From what we've seen or heard, it's they have no choice. They just have to, because the way they look at the market. We had one submission specifically in Gauteng by a new supplier who actually sat and analyzed the market for us. We see these things that at times you don't connect the dots the way someone else does. And they were connected. In his submission, the supplier connected the dots for us to show, for example, ShopRite tends to operate across LSM categories, and therefore doesn't matter where you want to list, doesn't matter what you want to do, you're going to encounter a ShopRite buyer with these terms. So there's no way of avoiding this one. Two, if you go to the next retailer, this is what they say they will still encounter, because it seems to be the norm and the practice in the sector. And so when you say it's agreed upfront, um, it's also a situation where smaller suppliers find themselves without an option. It's not they're forced to agree because they do want their products. You are the only route to market for them. So that's the context that you also need to understand some of the questions that we're asking today in relation to these trade terms. So that's the desperation, and that's a very desperate voice that we've had coming out of those small suppliers. You mentioned the basic rebates. Is that a basic rebate, or the number of rebates that for? You wanted to comment on what I've just said?
I just want to comment on your previous statement. Is
Yes.
Food security and safety, the new law that has come into effect, has meant that we had to delist a lot of small suppliers.
Yeah.
Because we are ultimately responsible for the product on the shelf. If anybody goes putting a claims against us, our directors can be criminally charged for that.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, our previous CEO had an initiative, for instance, we wanted to encourage housewives to bake for us, to sell, even to buy and to set them up in business.
Not
But
easy.
we had to put it to him, either you're going to end up in court or you must stop this practice, because that's the fact of the law. So sometimes it is prohibitive for a small supplier to actually supply to us, because ultimately we are responsible for a product on the shelves.
Yes.
Even the sheep that comes from the farm, we must trace that back exactly to where which farm it comes from. We must stand in for that. So it is a formal process that you must go through, unfortunately.
No, we understand that. In fact, I will address that. I intend to address some of that towards the end of these questions.
Okay. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
No, that's definitely understood from our side. On basic rebates, I wanted to understand, is that a once-off rebate, which is called a basic rebate, or is it a number of rebates that are lumped under that?
No, ma'am, it's one rebate that applies to, it's a percentage that applies to the total cost of products purchased annually from a supplier.
And is this rebate, that benefit, is it passed on to consumers, and how is it passed on? Can you explain that to us?
Yes, it's certainly passed on to consumers. So it's a deduction of the cost of the goods purchased. So the cheaper we purchase the goods, the cheaper we can sell them to our customers. It's widely accepted that we are the cheapest retailer, or at least the most competitive, and there you can see it's reflected in the price to customers. So we deduct, we know that reduces the cost of goods purchased for us from the suppliers.
So basically, it means the supplier, I just want to understand the mechanics of it. So does that mean when a supplier supplies to ShopRite, they deliver if they were expecting 40 rands for their good, they will then be getting maybe 38 rands because there was a basic rebate taken off?
Correct. So if in your example, there was a 2% basic rebate, I'm just going to use numbers by way of example. The supplier agreed to a 2% basic rebate, and he came and sold a tin of baked beans for 10 rand to ShopRite. We would then pay him at the end of the month, or as agreed, we would then pay him 8 rand. So we deduct the 2% rebate off that fee. And that... Oh, sorry, that's 20%. 9.80.
Yeah.
Sorry, my...
No, yeah, so the supplier gets lesser money, basically.
Yes, and that's why